Afternoon. So we're going to talk about content strategy and how we're using that on the law school's website to keep all the content fresh, because there's a lot. So I'm Jennifer Strost. I'm the Director of Online Strategy and Identity for the law school. And I managed our huge redesign project back in 2015. We did a massive redo of our website. We migrated from Drupal to WordPress, and we needed more flexibility in our designs so that all of our content editors could manage their own content more easily. So I also talk at things like High Ed Web and WP Campus and try to share our experiences with other people so that make things easier. This is Jamie.
I'm Jamie Bergen. I'm the senior web developer at Stanford Law School. I actually started my career as a biomedical researcher, and I transitioned into web development, and I now focus primarily on WordPress development.
Okay.
Excuse me, before we start, just a real quick question. I'm just curious. Looking back now, you mentioned that a few years ago we did a major redesign. You transitioned from a Drupal site to a WordPress site. So given what's happened with Drupal in the meantime, do you think that was the right decision? Do you have any second thoughts about that? I'm just curious.
It was the right decision for us. We have 300 plus content editors on our site, about 50,000 pages and growing. And we have a team of just 3 people. So we need them to be able to do their own, make their own edits and do their own thing. And with our Drupal site, what we had was very restrained with the templates, just the way it was set up, and things were not intuitive to find. So then our team was doing the majority of the work. So if people were trained to do it themselves, they only do it maybe once or twice a year. They forget, and then they had to come back to us either to get training again or just for us to do their work for them. So it wasn't working for us. Yeah, no, that's a good question. Okay, so we have a really small team and a really giant website. Like I said, it's 50,000 pages, 300 content editors, and there's 3.25 of us. So we have an intern that helps us, but yeah, we're a pretty small team. And so we struggle with the day-to-day of how do you keep up with all of the requests that are coming in from content editors that just need minor updates or a little bit of help here and there, your normal job, and then still have time for Jamie to work on adding new features and functionality and keep the website growing and getting better and not standing still. So we decided that we needed to try to automate as much as possible for our website, and so we just want to share some of the things that we're doing. So we really need to keep our stuff organized. When we did the transition of content from the old site to the new site, we were very fortunate because the data was very well structured and there were relationships built in, and we did the same thing with our new site. So we made sure that everything is related to something else, and I'll show you more about that. And then we also didn't want our new site to go stale really quick and get outdated like the old site did. So we took a look at the academic calendar that we have at the law school and what content we need to put in front of people when, and then we created our content timeline for that. And then we managed to schedule automatic emails to people, and then Jamie's going to talk a lot about how to leverage your project management system and try to leverage APIs for automating stuff even more. So here's what we started out before we even built our site is, so over here we have all of the different content types that we have for our site, and across the top again, all the different content types. And so we needed to know what relates to everything else. And so we have people who are authors, faculty, directors of programs. We have publications, cases, projects, fellowships, courses. I mean, you name it. We have any content type that we have on our website could be related to another type. And we want to make those connections so that we can automate things on when they're building their pages. So we started out knowing that we needed to build these connections. And then in order to create the connections, we use a WordPress plugin called PostToHost. And that is what lets us say, like, okay, I have a publication. That's what this is up here, is kind of the back end of when we put in a publication. What are the fields that we're filling in for that publication? So what's the title of it, the citation, who's the author? That's just the data of the post itself that it shows on the page. But there's the post to posts gives us the ability to make relationships between the content. And that's what we're doing over here on the right, is we are saying that this particular publication is related to the author, who's the person or people who wrote it, and the organization who that person is representing, so that it could be pulled in on the person's page and also on the organization's page. And then down here, what I'm showing, and this is, I put a link to the slide, so I know that this is not ideal. So if you go back to our session, there's a link to this. But so then on the back end, what we are doing here is we're pulling in the content for this organization, and we're using a technology that's called a panel builder that our agency developed and we're using, and it lets us build a query. So I can look for related publications that are related to an organization, which is, in this case, Steyer Taylor, which is one of our programs and centers. And then you can see here too, for this organization, you can see what all the other posts on the website are that are related to it. In case you need to undo one, you can add and remove. And so what that looks like on the front end, and this is a little bit how the site that we built for them, we combine the dynamic content and the manual content. So these people, they're out doing research, they are lawyers, they're busy, they're not managing their websites. So we need to make sure that they have the ability to represent their organization and their work without having to deal with doing website stuff every day. So we combined this carousel, which is manually entered content, and they use this for announcements. So whenever they have a new report that goes out that they want to promote, or in this case, they have a new leadership team, that's manual content. But right here, we're mixing in automatic content, which is publications. So our library team does an amazing job of putting publications into our system and tagging all the people so that it shows up. And then here is a panel with their projects. They don't add a lot of projects very often, but so we put these in manually. And then when you go to the project pages though, they can automatically pull in on those pages any publications, media, news, and events related to the projects. So it's the same on all the pages on the site. And then down here, so we're using news and media, where that's doing a dynamic query as well. So we're kind of blending for each organization what makes sense to them on what they want to show on their homepage. Yeah.
So it sounds like that since you have such a huge number of content editors, it's a very distributed kind of operation. But was there any sort of thought in advance? There was, but in terms of, okay, this is the kind of content we want on the website, and so everybody sort of has a charter in terms of what they should create. Because otherwise, it seems like there'd be a lot of very ad hoc, but there's sort of a common plan, sort of a common vision that everybody's following.
Yeah, so it turns out that a lot, so we have like news, events, publications, people, projects, cases, fellowships. These are the standard things that people want to put out there, so it happens to be common because of the theme, I guess, of our big site, and because of the work that the programs and centers are doing. And then we interviewed all of them when we were doing our redesign to talk to them and understand what are their needs. The old website, people, like if they had a news, they were mentioned in a press release or something, and it was 3 years ago, they didn't want it on their site anymore because it looked really old and dated. But since it was in the system, they were forced to have it there. But, or same, like if people do events, like what's not showing up right here right now is that they have a panel that queries in events, but they don't have any events that are coming up right now. But if they go put an event in the events calendar, it'll show up. So I guess, and then, yeah, so I touched on this just a little bit. So in our discovery process, it made a lot of sense to just talk to people and figure out what they needed and what content was important to them, but also when it was important to them. Because like we have our clinics, they do their recruiting, like for current students to want to sign up for clinics. That just happened in May. So we need to check in with them before that to say, hey, check out your website, make sure everything is like all spiffy and nice the way you want it, because you probably haven't updated it since last summer because you're busy. And so we did interviews with everybody, and we figured out, so who's the content owner, what's the content that's important to you, when do you need people to check in with you as a little reminder. And we took notes of all of that, and so we kept it by the organization and when they wanted us to reach out and if we reached out. That spreadsheet got really big, and it was a really hard manual process for us. So, but it helps them because we want to check in with them and make sure that this new site stays fresh. And again, just that they can leverage all of the automatic content that other people are putting into the system just as part of like their daily jobs, so that they don't have to go do it manually. And then what we did after talking with everybody is we tried to map out our various content with, up at the top here is future students and kind of the timing. So we're starting in academic year, so September to August, and we're trying to map out like when do they apply, when, you know, this is when the application period is for our school, and then here's when we start admitting people, and then there's admit weekend. And so there's different content that we have to put up on certain pages on our site at that time to make sure that they're seeing what they're supposed to be seeing. And it's not just the homepage, it's like the future student portal or the current student portal, to make sure that they're getting what they need in the moment. And what's really nice about the panels that we have on our site is that we can just drag and drop them. So if, say, it's graduation and you know, they need graduation logistics, we can pop that up higher on the page. Or if they just graduated and now they have to study for the bar exam, that goes up higher. And so we keep track of all of that in that spreadsheet, but that got to be a lot. And what we ended up doing was, so for the home page, those key portal pages and other really important pages on our site, we have this plan where it's like month by month and panel by panel on our site, what exactly content we needed to have, so that we're not going and reinventing it, we're just like copying and pasting. And then we made these blueprints. So we have what content we want in front of people, and then we mapped it to our panels and what does that look like to us, like which layouts are we going to use. And so like we always have the hero message in the background on our homepage, and we have a set of those that we run through to keep things fresh. And then we try to change the layout of our highlights panel probably quarterly, so that people realize that it's not just the same old blocks on the page. We change those every day. And then we change the order based on where we're at. And then sometimes we're promoting, you know, programs that are important right now. Like I said, the clinics was probably on the homepage last month or beginning of this month. And then we pull in content from our magazine as well. And then here's kind of how that translates into different home pages. So it's the same labels as the last page, but then this is the visual of how that translates for us. Okay, so that spreadsheet got really, really unwieldy. And so we needed a system to help us keep track of all the different tasks and assign it to people and make things recurring tasks. So we checked out Trello. So that's the system that we use. And we have a board in Trello that is just for the content calendar and these different cards. So for each month, we have a card for what the task is, who it's assigned to. Then there's due dates, and then we can enter the details of what needs to be done for that task, or if there's emails that need to be sent, who do they need to be sent to. And let's see, am I missing anything there? No? Okay. All right, so that's just how we keep track of everything. So, Jamie, we're going to talk about how we use all that now.
All right, so yeah, so Jen just talked about beautifully planned out content calendar and a really detailed Trello board that has all of our content updates we want to make and reminders to people. And so that's really great. The problem was that our team of 3 found ourselves down to 2 about 6 months ago. And so Jen and I were getting a little bit overwhelmed and kind of worried that we were going to be falling behind checking our content updates calendar. So we sat down and we had an idea that maybe we could take some steps to automate the management of our content updates Trello board. Kind of take a lot of that hands-on work off our plates and onto a robot's plate. So before I talk to you about how we did that, it's important to know just a little bit more about how our Trello boards are set up. So actually just curious, how many people have used Trello here? Okay, so a few. And so Jen explained it pretty well. It's pretty simple. You have boards and each board can have a list and each list has cards. So this is kind of a simplified representation of our content updates board. She showed you the real one. This is kind of a simple one, and it just has the list by month. And then it's important to know, though, that that's kind of one of our many boards, and it's kind of in the background. And every day, our team is looking at our current projects board. The current projects board has a lot of lists, but the 2 that are relevant to the process I'm going to describe are upcoming projects list and a waiting for client list. So that kind of gives you more of an idea of how we use Trello.
We also use it, we use it as sprint management. So we have what's in progress, what's ready for review, what's done.
Right. Right. So that's in our current projects board.
Yeah. So we kind of live in there and we review it every week.
So going into the content updates board, there are 2 different types of cards, or 2 different categories. One of them would be what I call a content update or an internal reminder. So those are labeled with orange. And so the description field for that would just be kind of a reminder to us of the content that our team needs to update and where, and maybe we could use Trello's checklist fields to make sure that we cover all the items for that task. The second kind of card is a content notification or an external reminder. And this is telling us that we need to reach out to some kind of, to another group. So an administrative office or a program or a center within our school. And so the way that we set up these cards is to use the description to have an HTML formatted email. And the reason that we use HTML formatting is so that we can have some formatting in there, such as put in bold the line that says, please get back to us whether or not you have changes. So just kind of highlight some things for them, and also include links to their page so it's really easy for them to go check it. Additionally, for this kind of card, we use a Trello power-up, like an add-on for custom fields. And so that allows us to have a field that includes the email notifications, or the email addresses that we need to send it to. And then also an email subject line field. So now let's talk about how we built the Trello bot. It's important to remember that automation isn't magical. It's basically just taking all the steps that you would have had to do by hand and that were probably kind of boring, and getting the computer to do those. So the first step to automate any process is just to step through each task, each step in detail, and understand what you would have been doing yourself. So this is the process that we want our automation to follow. So daily, the first step is that we want it to look for any cards that are going to come due in 7 days. If it's a content update task, then, which is one of the internal tasks, we'd want it to copy that card to our team's current projects board, the one that we look at every day, and put it in the upcoming projects list. And then we'd also want it to send us an email reminder to say, hey, we put this card there, you should probably get to it in a few days. If it's a content notification task or something that's external, we would have it send us an email, so send our internal team an email that basically previews what it's going to be sending out in 7 days. And the reason that we're doing this 7 days before is we want to check it over and make sure we're not sending out something that's not correct or not accurate anymore. So then the second step that we want to automate daily is finding any cards that are due that day. So if it's a content update task, you'll recall that we already copied it to our board, kind of have it in our queue. So all we're going to do is update the original card's due date to the next year. If it's a content notification task, one of the external ones, we're going to have it send out that notification that we previewed 7 days ago, have it copy that card to our team's current project board in the waiting for client list, and then update that card's due date to the next year. So here's kind of a very concrete example of what I just talked through. So say it's December 25th, 2019, and so maybe you don't want to be working on this day. You'd rather have something automated. So the first thing it's going to do is look for cards due in 7 days. So it's going to find these 2 cards that are due January 1st. Then it's going to go ahead and take the content update card and move it to our upcoming projects list. Then it's going to send our team a notification. The subject will just be the title of that card, and the notification is just a heads up that we have something in our list that we need to work on. In the case of the content notification card, it's going to send our team this kind of preview email, and it's going to include the due date, so the date that it's going to be sent out to the actual person, the subject line, the send to email or emails, and then a preview of the message. So we can look at that and make sure that Jane is still the person who manages this content, we have her email address correct, everything is good to go. All right, so then the next thing it's going to do is look for cards due today. So now let's pretend it's January 1st, another day that you might not want to be working. So now it's going to identify these 2 cards due today. The content update card, we've already moved it to our upcoming list. We've sent ourselves a reminder, so it's just going to update the due date to the next year. And then for the content notification, it's going to send it out to the person, and it's going to copy that card to our waiting for clients list, and then it's going to update its due date. So the nice thing about Trello's API, and a lot of the major project management systems have a good API, is that it makes it possible to automate this workflow that we just talked about. So the following few slides are going to be kind of developer heavy, but hopefully I can just kind of explain at a higher level what's going on, and it'll make sense. So if you have an account on Trello, you can go to developers.trello.com and get your app key and your app token. And so this is just an example of a call to the Trello API and the list endpoint. So if you've ever seen output from a JSON API, it kind of looks like that. And this is our content updates board, and you can see kind of the names of the lists, the September, October, November, and the IDs. And then you could choose, like, I want to get information about the cards on that September list, so you can take the ID from that and do another call to the cards endpoint. So another question, has anybody used Google Apps Script? Okay, cool. So this is kind of my go-to automation tool if it's a simple workflow like this. I really like it because it's really easy to get started. It's based on JavaScript, so if you're a web developer, you're probably reasonably familiar with that. It has a number of built-in services for exactly the kinds of things that we need to do in this automation. So interacting with external APIs, sending emails. Our school uses Gmail as our email tool, so it's nice that that'll be just totally integrated in this. And then scheduling time trigger, so we need to run a task daily, so that makes it easy. And also it's easy to set up. So I'm guessing a lot of people have used Google Drive, so Google Sheet, Google Doc. So to access Google Apps Script, you just go to Tools, Script Editor, and then you can make a script that's attached to that document.
Do the emails have to be Gmails that you send?
It is integrated with your Gmail account, so that's by far the easiest way. I'm not sure if you could hook into something. You might be able to hook into something else. So now I'm going to show you, I'm not going to show you a full script. If you're curious about the full script that we use to automate the process, I'm happy to share it. It's on GitHub. But I'm just going to talk about a few of the key helper functions that kind of help us make everything work. So the first one is the basic Trello API call. It takes in a URL and options, and so that whatever endpoint you're looking for, and then it uses the URL fetch app class to fetch the results from that API call. Another thing we need to do is send an email notification. So that's, if you're using Gmail, that's super simple. So you're using the mail app class, and this function takes in the send to subject line and the message, and allows you to send an HTML formatted message. Another thing we talked about is updating a card's due date. So that's very easy to do with the Trello API. So we just take in the card ID. In all the cases we're updating a due date, we're just updating it to the next year. So I just have a function that finds that and then adds that as a payload. So you take in a card ID, you say when you want it to be due, and then make a call, a put method call that will update the due date for that card. Another, a little bit more complicated thing is to retrieve a card's custom fields, but that is possible. And what's important is to set custom field items to true in your query string, and that will allow you to return all of the custom field data from a particular card. And then a second helper function that takes card ID and the ID of a specific custom field you want. So say you want to get the list of email addresses from a particular card. So then you'd use this function, say that put in the ID for the custom field that has email addresses, and then get that value. And the final one is making a copy of a card. Again, this is easy to do. You specify the card ID and the destination list ID. It doesn't matter if the list is in the same board or a different board. It'll go ahead and copy that card, make a copy of it. It'll leave the original one in place and make a copy. So putting it all together, so we're using a time trigger on Google Apps Script. So we basically just tell it, I want to run this script every day at this time. And by updating the due dates to the next year after it's run through the process for each card, it basically sets up kind of a set it and forget it process so that it will go on indefinitely. Granted, our team still needs to be monitoring what's happening and making sure that the reminder emails are correct, that we need to make updates to them if any of the content owners change, or if anything else changes with the site. Another thing that I do, like I mentioned, the Google Apps Script is attached to a Google Sheet or some other Google Doc. I take advantage of that to kind of log the actions that it's taking, so I could, for QA purposes, so I can go back and make sure that it's doing everything we're expecting. So, so there are many obvious benefits to automation. One thing we noticed was that it helped us kind of solidify a process around managing our Trello board that was previously only kind of loosely defined. And it obviously makes it easier for a small team like ours to manage a large website and keep the content up to date.
So you're executing Google Apps Script from your own or whoever owns that Google Sheets.
Mm-hmm.
And from Google Sheets, your app script is sort of associated with when you open up the environment to embed app scripts with that sheet, right?
Yeah, it's linked to the sheet. You can also make a standalone script at this point if you don't need it to be linked to a sheet or a doc or anything. That's possible as well.
And that has to be associated with whoever owns that sheet account.
It's in your Google account, basically. Yeah. Some lessons we learned. So we still need to be, we need to stay on top of everything. We can't just let this do all of our work. And one of the things we learned early was that we needed to have that kind of 7-day ahead preview. We initially didn't have that step, and we were just having things run that day. And we found it really helpful to be able to have a preview and make sure if somebody typed an email address wrong or didn't do proper formatting, we can fix that ahead of time. And it didn't go out, yeah, so that's why we...
And that's why we logged.
Yeah. And then also it's kind of an overwhelming task to set this all up as far as
writing, pre-writing all these content notifications that need to go out to different groups. So we just implemented this a few months ago, so we're kind of staying 1 month ahead and writing up those notifications, a month ahead, and then after a year, we'll have kind of everything in place, and we'll be mostly hands-off.
What percentage of your tasks would you say you've now automated or
Like for our overall work?
Yeah, like in the day, or yeah.
There are a lot of them, but I would say any given month, there's maybe between 10 and 20, it depends on what month it is. But it's nice that it's reminding us to do it, so we don't have to remember, because we manage a lot of our requests. They come in through an email inbox to our team, and so we, the intern and the content manager kind of live in the inbox there, and so it's easy to get in there and not remember to check that other board. Or when it was just a manual process and we were going in between 2 or 3 boards of tasks, it's really nice, every Friday when we sit down and go through our projects, that next week's project's already there. We don't have to move it. We know, okay, we have to check in with that person. Or, we have reminders that since it's sitting in the waiting on clients, it's
Right.
like, hey, did you ever hear from that person? Is that sitting in the email box?
Yeah, I think it does justify automating, even if it's not a huge portion of your workday, because you also have to think about it if it's fun to do. Like, we have a content manager / UX designer, and she'd probably rather do more UX design than like
Copy and pasting
yeah.
emails from last year.
Right. Yeah.
I'm just curious to know if you've, because it looks like the effort on automation is really to kind of automate more of the process-related aspects of what you're doing. Is there any need to automate sort of some of the editorial work, for example, making sure that all the content that's posted conforms to certain style guidelines, or uses certain terminology, or is that something that is just so complicated it just can't be automated, or there's no need to because the content editors themselves are responsible for doing that? Or
Yeah, the content editors are responsible for writing their content. We have a style guide posted. But we're not policing everybody's writing. It's more like, here's the guidelines, take care of it, do what's right. If they mess up, then they'll hear from someone on our communications team. And we're in the communications team, so we coordinate with our teammates, but we're kind of the techies that we worry about making sure the website is up and running and features and functionality are there for other people to use.
But we are not necessarily automating, but trying to make it easier for us to make some of those content updates. So I don't think we're ever going to have it like pull the trigger and actually update our homepage without us seeing it. But we're trying to make it really easy when we go from one layout to another layout to like make it just a click of a button, not having to like piece all those
because it seems like
together.
in all processes, there are parts that can be easily automated and there are parts that cannot be easily automated. I think finding that boundary is really kind of challenging sometimes, and then somehow packaging that, encapsulating it in some sort of a bot or script or something, that's kind of also challenging too. So.
Yep, reminders are good for us.
Communication question. So with the automation, with the reminders, how does that communication really work? Is it just through email? So if they have some sort of follow-up with that's outside of Trello and the automation, or if it's through email, then directly to the box.
Yeah.
So it comes from our team email.
And we make sure the reply to is our team email and not like one of us. So it stays in like the queue that everybody's looking at.
I asked because I played with we use Smartsheet in our office, very similar to how you're using Trello is for card view and sort of thing. And they have some cool little mix-ins, kind of like what you guys have built. So we've had some success with queuing people that, hey, you need to do this thing, and then let us know once you've done it.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives them the interface to be able to like turn it off. So it's kind of nice having everything one system. So it's just curious if they're involved on the Trello side at all or not at all.
Sorry.
The clients,
No, it's just an email thing. So yeah, we still have to go and waiting for a client and see like, oh, did they get back to us? So it would be nice to kind of close that loop.
You guys have now the mindset that everything can be automated like that, don't you? I'm not
We are looking for more things.
Yeah.
Jimmy did make it so that the homepage panel, since we have 6 messages we sort of cycle through, she made it so that carousel, you can just drag the most current one to the top, and then that automatically changes. Like when I save the page, it changes the message. But yeah, just we're always looking for things to make life easier.
Yeah, anything where there's a lot of hands-on and you could define a process, it's just
Great.
Well, especially when we're copying and pasting the same content over and over. Thank you.
Thanks.